But now it's time for the big question, and my guest tonight has been a fixture on British TV for over 3 decades, which is confusing because she still looks about 25. Michaela Strachan exploded onto our screens. I remember, I was there in the late 80s in my pyjamas. She presented shows like The Wide Awake Club with the legend Timmy Mallet. She was involved in Good Morning Britain. She went on to present a variety of hit shows, including The Really Wild Show, of course, which indulged her passion for wildlife and the natural environment. This theme continued on the BBC's Country File, after which she joined the team on Spring Watch and Autumn Watch, the latest series of which is out now. You can catch it on the BBC iPlayer. The most recent episode aired on Friday. Take a look.
What I found, Chris, this is out of the beaver area and it's been gnawed by our beavers. They've taken the bark off and they've eaten that and they've chewed the end. Look at that. I mean, obviously they've got incredibly sharp teeth. They'll use the bottom incisors as the cutting tool and they're at an angle, a perfect angle. But what's really interesting is they've got to keep those teeth really sharp. So every 10 minutes, they'll stop and they'll grind the bottom incisors with the top incisors to sharpen them up.
And I'm delighted to say Michaela Strachan joins me now. Hi, Michaela.
Hello.
And you seemingly never tire of the British countryside.
Well, how can you? I mean, do you know, we spend so much time, don't we, behind a desk and behind a laptop,
yes,
that any opportunity that you can get out. We've just spent the whole week in Norfolk, and it's absolutely stunning. When you go to the beaches of Snettisham, and I haven't been there for a while. I mean, I was there for Spring Watch, but before that, I hadn't been back to Snettisham for such a long time, and it's just beautiful, and it makes you reappreciate just how amazing our coastline is. And at this time of the year, for autumn, you get thousands of waders coming in and migrating to our shores. And then if you're there at the right time, which is when it's high tide, you get this fantastic aerial display of all these birds going up. I mean, in particular, a bird called a knot. Hundreds of thousands on the, just swirling in the sky, and it's absolutely stunning.
And the natural landscape is never the same 2 days in a row.
Well, I don't know, yeah, I suppose if the tide goes in and out, and you've got birds on it.
You know, the light changes, doesn't it? And, it just feels different to me. And I'm very much an urban boy, but I grew up in North London and we had Hampstead Heath, and I used to go running in the Heath every day, and every time it felt different.
But I think that's the amazing thing about London, isn't it? I mean, wherever you live, you're not very far away from somewhere green, from a park or a river or something. You can get somewhere to see a little bit of wildlife.
And I think that's the point about your career and about the shows you do. It's not only the rural environment, nature is everywhere.
You can find nature anywhere you look. I mean, obviously it's better if you go to somewhere wild. If you go up to the Cairngorms, you're going to see more than you would in London, probably. But yeah, you can always find wildlife if you look for it.
And actually, when I'm coming home from these studios and I'll see an urban fox and I just find them, I know they're a pest. Some people call them, some people
they
call
are
them
so not a pest.
But what they are is they're
not.
incredibly elegant animals, very sophisticated, intelligent, and just beautiful.
I think anyone that's walking through, well, I really hope most people, let's say, 95% of the population, when they see an urban fox, will smile as they see it walk across the road. Yeah. I mean, I know I do. I still get really excited when I see an urban fox.
And they're canny. I mean, they're great survivors.
Indeed,
they don't get any help from us.
I don't know, some of them do in people's gardens, I think.
Do they?
I think so. A lot of people put things out for them.
Not round in my parts. That would be frowned upon. So, I mean, are there animals, for example, that you don't like?
Oh, I think the only thing that annoys me, I mean, I see its place in the world is a mosquito. And that's about the only thing. Because, I'm vegetarian, I don't eat blood, I don't expect something else to eat my blood. So yeah, I mean, they're not fun and they're not enjoyable, but they have a role to play in the world.
What about rats?
I don't mind rats. I like rats. Why wouldn't you like rats?
Talking of sophisticated, I mean, if we think that foxes are streetwise and great survivors, I mean, rats must be the greatest of all species.
Well, rats are brilliant at procreating, and they have to, because they're fodder. I mean, rodents are fodder for so many other things that, they have to multiply. It's like rabbits. I think the statistic is 1% of rabbits will survive because they're fodder for everything else. So that's the reason they multiply. And the thing is, because we've we've messed around with the natural balance of things. You know, if you take predators out of the ecology, then, you know, you are going to have an explosion of a certain animal. So that's why it's difficult now, and that's why people see things as a nuisance, because we've messed up with a circle of life.
Yeah, and well, I completely agree with you on that one. In terms of rats, I mean, they're so sophisticated that they're able to adapt to poison, aren't they? Over generations, they learn to tolerate poison and it doesn't kill them anymore.
Is that right?
Yeah.
You clearly know more about rats. I think you're slightly obsessed with rats.
I had friends to kill around a while ago. And it was explained to me that some of the poisons have to, you know, they change the dosage and they change the formula because they start tolerating it. It's remarkable.
Do you know, we had rats in our roof during lockdown. And of course, I won't kill a rat. I just won't kill a rat.
No.
So I have a humane trap, and they were up in the attic. They were above our bedroom. And I'll tell you, when you hear them at night above your bedroom, it sounds like there's an army of people above there.
Yeah.
And so we put these humane traps out. But of course, they go in them at like 3 a.m. And then they just gnaw to try and get out. And then you've got a rat in the trap.
It sounds like a scene out of a Stephen King novel,
It doesn't. And then you've got to sort of sneak out and try and release the rat.
You have to hope there aren't any cracks in the ceiling. They start falling onto you as you sleep in the bed. Can you imagine that? The stuff of nightmares. I've got to say, I'll let you have foxes, but we'll have to part company on rats, I've got to say. Although it's funny how subjective it is, isn't it? Because, you know, we think of rats as, a lot of people do, as ugly and you know, people find them scary. But put a fluffy tail on a rat and you've got a squirrel.
Well, some people don't like squirrels. I mean, as you can imagine...
They're pretty, aren't they? Nature is unequal in that way, that it makes some creatures prettier than others.
It does indeed, and there's a real sort of catwalk, isn't there, of the creatures you like to see on the catwalk and the ones that you don't. But usually it's the ones that maybe aren't so appealing looks-wise that are way more interesting. I mean, we do a lot of things on, I don't know, we did a wasp spider recently on the show. And you look at a wasp spider and its life cycle is way more interesting than a lion. You know, what does a lion do? I mean, yes, I love seeing lions.
Sleeps most of the time.
Sleeps most of the time, goes and hunts an animal and then sleeps again, procreates. And that's, you know, that is quite a simple lifestyle. Whereas you get a lot of insects. I mean, just look at a butterfly, for instance. I mean, we all know, yes, we all know it, but it's fascinating. And I remember explaining that to someone that didn't have much of an education. So I explained it to them, and their mind was blown. They were an adult, but they'd never learnt that. And
it's like something out of science fiction.
They were blown away that a caterpillar becomes a butterfly. They were like, no.
Well, I think it's a conspiracy theory, but we'll have to disagree on that one as well. No, they are amazing, and butterflies are gratuitously beautiful.
They are indeed. And yet it's the caterpillar that does all the work. So the caterpillar does all the work, comes out, and the butterfly gets all the glory.
Who knew? Sounds like showbiz. Now,
yes.
Let's talk about... Well, I want to get into everything, but can we just talk about the fact that hopefully we're at the tail end of the pandemic. It's been really tough for everyone, including those in broadcasting, and well done for managing to still shoot your amazing, amazing shows. But I do believe you had a bit of a difficult experience in quarantine. Are you able to talk about that or not?
I don't mind at all. I had to do quarantine twice.
And I know you followed the rules and you didn't mind that, but I believe the experience was pretty...
Do you know, the first time I did it, I didn't mind because I totally accepted that it was necessary. You know, I hadn't been vaccinated, and you have to do 11 days in the hotel quarantine in Heathrow. And then the second time I did it, I just thought, well, hang on a minute, I've been double vaccinated.
Yeah.
You know, what is the point of this? Still do it. But the price of it went up. It was extremely expensive.
This is you, by the way. This is you in quarantine, dancing.
No, but you need to play the song. Because
yeah, well, I don't know if we can do that, Tom.
Well, I mean, I can sing it for you if you like.
Yeah, go for it. That's a better idea.
But it was, don't fence me in. I don't know how much I'm allowed to sing before you have to
sing
pay.
all of it, you're fine.
Don't fence me in. And that's what it felt like. I mean, it was this hideous, as you can see, it was a hideous car park.
Yeah.
And that was like your exercise yard that you were allowed out for 20 minutes a day, actually twice a day if you were lucky.
Yeah.
And then you were allowed to either walk. I mean, you have people in their pyjamas sort of walking like zombies around, or you got people like myself that just ran round. I managed 40 laps of the tiny car park in my 20 minutes at one stage.
Well, and what about the food, by the way?
Yes, what about the food? I had a bit of breakfast gate, didn't I? And if you follow me on Twitter, you'll, oh my gosh, sometimes you wish you'd never started something.
So what did they serve up? What were you given?
Do you know, some of the food was okay, but one day the breakfast came and it was a couple of slices of white bread and it was toast. Is there a picture there? Yeah, and Rice Krispies. And, you know, as I say, you pay to go in that hotel, you're forced to do it, and you were forced to pay £2,250. And I just think that that's not very good value for money.
No, I'm just looking for the protein. I can't see
Well,
it anywhere.
exactly. And, you know, when I complained about it on Twitter, people saying that, you know, starving children would be grateful for that. Well, of course they would, but that's not the point. The point is value for money.
Correct.
And, you know, I like value for money. I don't even need any more than that. To be perfectly frank, I don't, you know, I'd have an apple for breakfast. But it's all about value for money, isn't it? If you're going to charge that, then, and I understand that certainly there's a lot of security involved, there's a lot of palaver involved. I don't think they make a massive amounts of money. But put it this way, I'm very, very glad I'm not going to have to do hotel quarantine again.
No, absolutely. And I think you're right to call out, because, you know, you have dutifully followed the rules at all times. You're a very responsible person. But it's just the case now that there is an industry, I think, around COVID, you know, and I think we've got to be mindful of that. Some people are profiteering, and I think at some point common sense has to prevail.
Well, and also it was very unfortunate because I came from South Africa, and there was
You live in South Africa
I
now,
do,
right?
and there was at the time there was this so-called South African variant.
Oh, yes.
But I don't know whether it's ever been proved that it came from South Africa in the first place, because South Africa has a very efficient way of testing variants. It's a speciality that they have, and so you know they found the variant.
Yeah.
And then the country got completely penalised for finding that variant. And I saw someone interviewed on South African television, and he said, you know, you almost don't want to find a variant because then you almost get blamed for the variant.
Well, definitely it happened with the Kent variant as well, because we also have excellent labs where they diagnose these new and identify these new strains. And as you say, you know, we had the Kent variant.
People from Kent did not have to go into the hotel quarantine.
Well, probably not. Well, they found the Kent variant in South America before it was identified here in the UK, but once it's Kent, I suppose.
Yeah, and it just gets a label.
Same with South Africa. Well, look, you're here. You're in one piece. You're out of quarantine.
Yes.
You're in GBNews quarantine now.
Am I? Oh, my goodness, you're not going to let me out?
Oh, well, listen, you're among friends. You've got OnlyFans around here, and the food is far better. There's even wine in the green room, so seriously, you know, the sky's the limit. Let's talk about your incredible career. It did start in the 80s, which I think is mind-boggling, given your youthful demeanour. The late 80s, 87, 88, you got into TV. So what happened?
Well, I actually trained for musical theatre, and at the time I was in a musical in the West End.
Which one?
Seven Brides for Seven Brothers.
Which is a classic.
And I was one of the brides.
Right.
And I went back to see my jazz teacher from Arts Educational College, and she said, oh, well, how are you doing? And I said, yeah, good. What are you going to do after the musical? I said, I really fancy getting into children's presenting. She said, well, did you know there's an audition and they've asked us to send people? Why don't you go? So I went for the audition for the Wide Awake Club, which was a Saturday morning children's magazine show, just for the experience, really. I didn't for 1 minute think I was going to get it. And then I got it. And in those days, there were only 4 channels. I mean, can you believe it? There were only 4 channels. So, you know, if you were watching television at 7:30 on a Saturday morning, you were either watching the test card or you were watching the Wide Awake Club. Unfortunately, most people preferred the Wide Awake Club. So you became well known very quickly. And obviously
almost overnight. I mean, I remember.
Yeah, it really was like that. And audiences were much bigger in those days for each programme because there was less telly.
Yeah, and you obviously had a great on-air chemistry with Timmy Mallett.
Well, and Tommy Boyd.
And Tommy Boyd.
Yeah.
Both brilliant broadcasters.
Brilliant, and I keep in contact with both of them. And in fact, recently I've seen both of them, which
Tommy
has been
Boyd
fantastic.
has gone on to become a sort of late-night radio legend.
Oh, I mean, he's brilliant on the radio.
He really is.
He's brilliant at leading an argument and leading it round in a circle. He's
Definitely.
really clever.
He's one of those rare broadcasters. He doesn't actually need guests. He's better without. He can just talk.
Yeah,
I've heard him just do an hour with no calls.
No, I can well believe it.
He's so articulate. He
Yeah.
develops an argument, as you say, and he's quite attritional and gets people wound up, which is a great skill. And then there's Timmy Mallett, who's definitely a legend in this country.
Timmy Mallett, I mean, as I say, I saw him recently and we're still really, really good friends. And of course, you know, as we've both aged, we've calmed down. But he's still great fun, and he was huge, wasn't he? I mean, in the late 80s, early 90s, he was absolutely iconic. Banging people over the head with his mallet. And he was a genius, actually. He was super talented and great fun to work with.
Yeah, and I think you were just a natural. I feel like you were yourself from day one. There was no pretense, there was no caricature. You were just being yourself, I think.
I think I went into it, I was 20 years old, and I went into it, you know, like a rabbit in the headlights. And I remember my very first programme, and they said to me, right, you sit down, because it's live, obviously. They said, you sit down and you look at the camera with the red light on. And there were three of us, sort of like that. So Tommy was in the middle looking at the camera there, and there was a camera there and a camera there. So that was the one with the red light on, and I was sitting here. So I thought, right, that one's got the red light on. So it came to me, and I looked at the one with the red light on. Nobody told me that it moved. I know that sounds really stupid, but I was 20 years old. I was completely naive when it came to telly. And I think these days people are so used to filming themselves on social media that they would probably be an awful lot better on their first show than I was.
Well, I don't know. I'm pretty sure I was there for the first, or certainly one of the early
You
shows.
do not remember the very first show, I'm sure.
Well, I might not. I couldn't say that was your first show, but I would have been. I would have been early teens. Target audience, I guess. For that.
Yeah,
Well, maybe a little bit older than
because I reckon our target audience is probably about 8 or 9.
And when you were on for all those years, a lot of middle-aged men were watching. Dads were getting their kids to watch. Why would that be, Michaela?
I've no idea. Why do you think?
I don't understand. I think it's Timmy Mallett's amazing eyes.
I think it was, clearly.
And those glasses, of course. But look, I obviously you were something of a bombshell, as you still are, but I think people just liked you. I think it's really important. You're a great entertainer. And then you segued into The Really Wild Show. And that was another phenomenon, wasn't it?
Via The Hitman and Her, which was a late-night music show,
That's a good point.
which has become very iconic. And, I mean, I'm still amazed how many people come up to me and go, do you remember The Hitman and Her? As if I'm going to forget it. I did it for 4 years. But, you know, it was a late-night music show. It went out at 2 in the morning. I mean, who was watching at 2 in the morning? But it appears an awful lot of people were at a certain age. Yes. Because, I mean, I reckon every week, at least a handful of people come up to me and talk about The Hitman.
Was it live?
No, it was never live. The only live ones we did was when we went to a rave. Okay. So we always used to pre-record it, and we used to start about 10 till midnight. And in those days, television was recorded on tape. And then a bike would come and it would take the tape from whatever nightclub we were in and bike it to Granada, that put it out, you know, a few hours later, 2 hours later.
You record it, what they describe it as an industry term, as live, right? So it was effectively
It was definitely as live, yeah.
And God knows how many viewers you had, but probably a lot. And similarly, the Wide Awake Club, probably watched by what? At least 1 million people.
Oh, no, I think it was much more in those days. I mean, I don't remember, but no, much more than 1 million.
Yeah, millions.
Millions.
The kind of ratings that TV networks would absolutely
would love now.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, you're not doing too bad with Spring Watch and Autumn Watch as well. Tell me about making that show. A massive audience for that. Is it hard work?
Do you know, it's intense. I don't think people realise quite how much work goes into it, because particularly Spring Watch, because we're filming all the time, we've got cameras on nests. Yeah. You know, we're filming all the time, and so we have to know what's going on with those animals, and if something eats something, then that goes into the show that night. Yeah. So you have to be very on top of things, and because it's a very technical show, we have technical rehearsals, we have a dress rehearsal, so it's a long day, and sometimes you have to get your head round scientific explanation that, you know, you might never have talked about or known of before. So you've got to get your head around content quite quickly. I mean, like yourselves, you know, you're constantly getting your head around content and constantly doing a bit of research. But it's good fun. I mean, it's a great programme. What is so nice about it is our audience seem to love it. If you don't like wildlife, you don't watch it.
Correct.
So people that watch it love it. And on social media, we have very, very minimal negative comments. It's all very lovely, which is great.
And rightly so. And how about Chris Packham? Tell me about this man. How is he to work with?
Oh, I mean, I've worked with Chris for a long time, and I absolutely adore Chris. I mean, I have the biggest respect for him.
His knowledge is vast.
I mean, he must have eaten some sort of encyclopedia as a child and kept doing it, because he's got a sponge of a brain. And it is quite funny when we sit in meetings sometimes and he'll be saying, look, we did that last year. Where, you know, I can't even remember we did it. He will remember exactly what we said about it. So, yeah, he has an incredible memory for knowledge. But also he's passionate about what he does, and he campaigns all the time. Yeah. And, you know, I just have, as I say, a huge amount of admiration for him. Yeah,
well, you're brilliant together on screen. Lots of emails coming in, Michaela. Jay on Twitter asks, do you think the foreign aid budget should be redirected to animal conservation?
Gosh, I mean, I don't feel equipped to completely answer that, but obviously I'd be delighted if there was more money for conservation. I think it's obviously highly important that we do conserve. I think in this country we need to think about rewilding a lot. Yeah. We need to think, I mean, on the Watches, we're on a farm which is one of those just brilliant farms. It's called Wild Pen Hill, and it's a regenerative farm, and they're doing farming for wildlife. We need to do a lot more of that. They've got a rewilding area.
And the cattle are grass-fed, and then what they do is they fertilise and water the soil with their own waste products.
Well, yeah, and do you know what they said to me? They said that they basically don't use pesticide, which means they don't have to use fertiliser, which means that maybe they don't get as much yield, but they're not spending a fortune on pesticide and fertilisers. So actually they make as much profit.
Obviously, circle of life comes back to it, and then also the end product is probably better too, I would have thought.
Well, of course it is. It's going to be much better for you if it isn't, if it hasn't been, caked with fertiliser.
And do you think that's the answer when it comes to issues around the environment? And clearly we are polluting at a rate of knots, and it's a horror show really globally. There's plastic in the oceans, concerns about our carbon emissions. But do you think that we don't want to throw the baby out the bathwater when it comes, for example, to farming? Because I wonder whether farming is sometimes the fall guy when it comes to environmental issues. And I wonder whether farming is also the solution as well as the problem.
Of course it is. Of course it's the solution. And I think we have to have a huge amount of support for farmers. I mean, I'm vegetarian, and I think we do all have to think about eating less meat going forward. I'm not saying everyone has to be vegetarian or vegan, but I think we do all have to think about reducing meat intake. And I think we have to support farmers through change and support them through doing regenerative farming. And I think, rather than governments give farmers subsidies for farming in a way that's not sustainable, let's give farmers subsidies for farming in a sustainable, regenerative, rewilding way, which is what is happening.
That's fantastic. I think the Norwegians are looking at feed for cattle which produces less methane after they've digested it. And I think there are lots of interesting ideas so that, as you say, we can continue. Because what you can't have, can you, is just vast monocrop everywhere. You can't just have fields full of wheat and soy and nothing else.
You can't, and I find it fascinating how many people will go to the top of a hill and look at the view and go, look at that amazing view. And I look at some of those views and I think there's nothing amazing about that view. It's just monoculture farming. There's not a tree in sight.
And all of that requires pesticides and fertilisers, doesn't it?
Yeah, and of course, we can farm in a wildlife-friendly way, and it's all about verges, it's all about, making sure you've got a rewilding area, regenerative. I mean, I'm not a farmer, I'm not a specialist, I'm not going to tell a farmer how to farm, but and a lot of farmers are terribly supportive about trying to encourage wildlife back because they realise that they're going to need that wildlife. Yeah. Do you know, I was giving an award today to the Pollinating the Peak, it was called, and it was run by the Bee Conservation Trust, and they say they talk to farmers all the time, and most farmers are really keen to put some flower meadows back, for the bees, because they realise you need bees to farm. You need bees. Yeah. So, you need to keep that going. So they really look forward to those people coming in and helping.
That's right, and I share your concerns about the planet, but I think we sometimes overestimate the capacity of man to fix everything with an industrial solution, whether it's chemicals or machines or fertilisers or whatever. It's like maybe nature's got some ideas about what's necessary. And that you
need nature.
Yeah,
you need
just a bit.
I mean, you need bees to pollinate your crops.
That's exactly it. Well, I couldn't agree with you more. And I think that's always the message of your shows is about that respect for nature. And as you say, rewilding has got to be the name of the game going forward. Final question, a brilliant one from Debbie on Twitter, who asks, "Hi, Michaela, which animal has been your favourite to work with?"
Oh, that has to be orangutans.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I've just become the patron of the Borneo Orangutan Survival Foundation, UK, BOSS UK it's called.
Brilliant.
And I did 2 series of a thing called Orangutan Diary for the BBC. And I got to be with orphaned orangutans, and it was just an amazing experience. And they are, out of all the apes, they're one of the more gentle ones, most of them.
Because they have the strength of what, 4 men, potentially?
I don't know offhand, actually, but they can be
powerful creatures,
and they can be very naughty. I mean, as they get to teenage age, they're naughty, and they do things like undo your shoelaces and bite your kneecaps and things. But they're a lot more gentle than a gorilla and a chimp, that's for sure.
Yeah. Well, look, we're going to release you from GB News quarantine.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure having you.
It's been a lot more pleasurable than hotel quarantine.
Well, look, I'm glad for that. Obviously, the bar was pretty low, but let me tell you that you can catch the latest series of Autumn Watch. 4 episodes.
Just 4 episodes this year.
All right. Well, do you know what? Each one of them will be, of course, a TV classic. You can go to the BBC iPlayer to catch them. Michaela's on Twitter as well. What's your Twitter handle then? So we can see what your next meal is going to be.
I can't remember. I'm on Twitter and Instagram.
But
you just...
You've got people around you that answer those questions.
No, you just put in Michaela Strachan and it comes up.
There you go. Do you know what? At Michaela Strachan, there you go. Thank you. My producer Tom seems to know the answer to that worryingly quickly.